All right, I think this is a good time to start. First of all, thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. I suspect that we'll have quite a few who's still wrapping up whatever they're in. Really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to hopefully engage a little bit in discussions about agents, in discussions about Databutton, and the structure of the talk today is largely going to be around. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the evolution of the LLM space over the past year or so, and then I'll just briefly speak about what Databutton is for those who's not familiar with that. And I'll also go a little bit into how we built Databutton, just very surface level to begin with. And then I was planning on doing a 10-minute-ish demo of building an app in Databutton to give some insights into how that looks and maybe some tips and tricks along the way. And then I was hoping to set aside the last minutes, if any, to hopefully hear from more people in the room. Lastly, before I get started, I would really appreciate if people would ask questions or lean in, as they probably have just as much insight and knowledge about the space that I have. It's really exciting to gather a lot of clever people in the same room. So with that being said, I think I'm just going to start. Elle shouting at a heart. Nice to see you too, Elle. So basically, I want to start a little bit with the history, just to think a little bit about what's happened over the past year, leading up to where we're at today. Where in the last year-ish, it's a little bit over a year ago since ChatGPT released, which took the world by storm a little bit. Together with that, a bunch of companies started to get funding, companies that you hadn't really heard about, and 5 people or whatever out of France raised hundreds of millions of dollars. There's like a lot of smaller niche companies that are starting to do LLM for real. There's of course been like heaps of LLM development before, but ChatGPT really marked a moment where it's hard to think back before it when you think about the enormous impact it has had. And then as people start to understand that we can engage with the world's knowledge, just as you were any other human, the first thing the internet starts to do is to use it to simulate computers of famous people. So through ChatGPT, this is from a very commonly read blog post from the early days, which was someone who tried to get ChatGPT to act as a computer to explore the computer of famous people. And since it has the accumulated knowledge of the world, it's making a guess based on public perception and sources it has available. So while ChatGPT marked a big moment, it didn't really have a large impact until their API released. And as their API released, things changed. AI went from being a chatbot and a way to talk to the world's knowledge, so to speak, to becoming another API. It became another building block in apps. Companies started to form around it. And people started to treat working with text as input and output as a new paradigm. You saw coding completion was probably the first big use case that came out of this stuff, where other players than GitHub Copilot, such as Tabnine and others, tried to get into the same space. The context windows at that time was quite short. GPT-3 had about 2K, GPT-4 had 32K. Now, GPT-4 at that point in time was so slow that very few people that I know about, at least, used it for stuff. Whereas GPT-3 was what most people were using at the time. And the biggest consequence of this, and this first opportunity that people started to see, was to chat with custom knowledge bases. And this is now back in in March, April, May. A huge part of the Y Combinator batch was around chat with your PDFs and chat with your knowledge base and HR chatbots and really chatbots and ChatGPT versions that had some knowledge about the company or some private knowledge base. Now, we were, of course, also into the hype. Our most used template in Databutton at the time was to chat with your PDFs. We had blog posts. One of the most reached blog posts we had was around the same topic. And this was the first real use case that people really started to think about. And we still see a bunch of remnants of that today. There's still a bunch of companies doing this. And then small wrappers started to become proper tools and softwares and companies. And one of the first ones that I distinctly remember was Cursor, which was basically aiming to build the world's first AI native code editor. Now, that implies that more people than professional coders get to participate in the world of development, which is very much in line with the ethos of Databutton as a company. Now, a couple months later, it is a VS Code competitor and a replica. So at some point along their way, they got more respect from developers than non-developers. But it really marked a step for people trying to disrupt the development world in a sense. Another paradigm that became really huge in this space was the world of RAG, or retrieval, augmentation, and generation, which a lot of people have written blog posts about, and there's so much content on the internet. But the reason for this coming up was basically that you wanted to either extend the knowledge of the ChatGPT trained knowledge base, or you wanted to bypass the amount of stuff you could have in the context window. Around this time is when the big companies such as Pinecones, the Pinecones and Chromas and VD8 and all these vector DBs started to come up as, for some reason, typical databases wasn't good enough for storing text. So embedding started to be used to get similarity search across from text and into these embedding databases. And then I guess is when we really started to feel it, I would argue, in Databutton was in the era when people started to really extend ChatGPT as a chatbot. And when I say that, I've called it the rise of the agents. But agent is a word that's defined by many different people in many different ways. And I think or at least my quick definition of it would be an agent uses its own reasoning and tools to complete an arbitrary, I can. Let's see, we might have some other people in the chat who's able to do that. Let me double check. Yeah, there we go. Excuse me. There we go. Yeah, so what is an agent really? So from our point of view, while ChatGPT and these wrappers around ChatGPT largely is custom system prompts. So typically a way to give it a persona, give it a context, give it some workflow, maybe some key information about who you're talking to or what you're supposed to do. Whereas providing the agent with a set of tools allows it to fetch or to do more actions to complete its goal. So the most typical tools would be to search the web. It can write code, such as code interpreter, which is now embedded into ChatGPT. You can access private data. You can send emails. You can create Notion pages. You can do all kinds of weird stuff. And all of a sudden, it mimics kind of a human, which has a bunch of different tools who can execute on a certain task or a goal. Now, this is when things really start to hype up, and a lot of people in the community. There were very few like real life cases in the early days, but the community does a lot of super cool stuff. Agents become like a big hype around like Q3 last year, and multi-agents such as pioneered in like MetaGPT and GPT Pilot and a lot of these other like multi-agent setups, which all of a sudden had like vast majority of agents working together to solve like really complex tasks. And as the LLM technology, so to speak, or the agent technology starts to become an infrastructure piece in more regular applications, it's really difficult to work with text as input and output. Whereas what I would really want to give out is things such as a list of news articles or a list of files or something like that. Whereas it's very geared towards just writing with text. You could easily see, I think if you go back to commits or to GitHub places from the April, May era, you'll find prompts such as please respond with JSON. You'll find stuff such as you will get a lot of money if you respond with JSON. And as people start to tame, or attempt anyway, to tame these agents and these system prompts, you start to see a bunch of techniques, very early stage techniques being employed, such as telling it that it has no fingers, so it would not produce placeholders and like silly and silly shortcuts. You could give it all the money in the world in reward. People give it private planes. You can tell it that your career really depends on its answer, so you should really get it right. And all of a sudden, people started to, or at least as engineers, you start to get somewhat uncomfortable because you're trained in a world where you have all these nice boxes and great rules, but all of a sudden there's so much like probabilistic stuff being thrown in. So this really is still, I would argue, a work in progress for a lot of people. It certainly is for us to tweak the prompts and to tweak the tools and how you describe the tools and how you describe what you can achieve with the tools. And literature has been coming out on this. So you have things such as chain of thought prompting and React prompting and all kinds of different workflows you can employ to get better results. Now, looking at the big early repos in the day, which was like AutoGPT, which was autonomous agents, it has maybe one of the biggest growth on GitHub. Some more close to home neighbors, GPT Engineer, really cool set of people from Sweden, who was really early on building these agents that could build like full software projects from a command line. And a lot of really cool stuff happened at this point in time, and really paved the way for the enormous world that is today, where we have the Devins and the Devicas and the Open Devins and now the Fume Dev, and now there's just a million. Now, ChatGPT ended up releasing Assistance API, which maybe more notably introduced tools and functions, so like an actual way to work with structured data in ChatGPT, which was much sought after. So all of a sudden, people started to write tools for connected to databases that was reusable. You can access internal product data. A lot of you have or will probably see this through LangChain, which was one of the big companies that popped onto this era. They are arguably the biggest collections of tools and integrations and ways to get basically data in and tools to use for your agents and stuff. And then a big moment happened, which was the OpenAI Dev Day, where OpenAI had made very few changes to their stuff since they launched their API in March and April. And all of a sudden, they released GPT Builder, which I'm sure most of the audience here has used, where people can build agents fully conversationally, which basically marked two big pivotal moments from at least from our point of view, where first was people start to build things conversationally for real, but also everything that is like chat with your PDF and stuff like that is basically thrown out the window, because now everyone can just go and upload your 10 PDFs or your 15 PDFs and throw in a custom system prompt, and you have your own ChatGPT. So companies or builders or app builders or whatnot that had this as a custom case got a bit of a more difficult time standing out, to say the least. But I think it's important to think about like OpenAI standing on the side and just seeing millions of developers building cool stuff. And over time, they'll just continuously introduce all the cooler stuff into their APIs. And as an active strategy on building things, I think it's important to keep in mind. This is also when I think most people start to get serious about thinking about like multimodality. Through some demos and whatnot, people started to really think about that you can combine vision, you can combine it with text, and you can basically prompt websites from images, from screenshots, from videos, and we were in for a treat. Like this is now like 6 months ago, and the world has basically changed. So, where we're at today basically is that all these technologies are still in its infancy. I think everyone is still figuring out how the relationship between humans and agents will be. In Databutton, we are trying to build the world's best AI app developer. And to do that, at its very core, Databutton consists of agents that are specialized in front-end dev, in back-end dev, in research, in planning, in debugging, and all kinds of stuff to help a user build their app. And as agents, of course, they are spec'd with system prompt and a large set of tools. They can read code and write code and read logs and update code and run it and test it and what have you. And maybe in the world of a lot of cool demos and flashiness and sexiness, we're very much trying to help people build real, impactful web apps. So full stack apps that can all the way from your idea, and it can do through user logins and managements and through payment systems and deploying it on the custom domain, and really an end-to-end way to build a full-fledged product from start to finish. And in order to do this, our agents write React as UI, which is quite common, and Python as the backend to lead into the world of basically AI development, where most things hits Python before it hits anything else. Now, as we think about how Databutton is built, we are, as a company, largely using GPT-4 models for code generation. Very well realizing now that the models from Claude and the Opus series and whatnot is equally competitive. GPT-4 has been really good for quite some time, so we built our world around that, and we have some other prompts that is using like a 3.5 model and some other like easy to use prompts, but the vast majority of our heavy lifting is done by GPT-4 internally. We use a message history as a short-term conversation memory. And with that, I mean that in Databutton, as opposed to doing like big one-shot prompts or big orders, it's more typical that you have a conversation on a topic to help break down an idea, or to help really understand how you should build something, or to spend some time on planning out a set of tasks. Databutton as a platform also knows about all the app-specific data you have, so it reads and stores to a database basically all the time on what elements you have, what secrets you have, what data you have, and all these kind of things. So it stays dynamic with you, despite without like overpopulating the context window, basically in the system prompt. We make a point out of this, actually, that we try to make the size of the context window as low as possible. And there's two big reasons. One of which is that as context windows gets big, and with context window basically mean the amount of tokens that is in the entire conversation you have. GPT-4 today has a context window around 100K tokens. But as the context window grows, the model tends to drift a little bit. It tends to be less accurate. It tends to do more mistakes, be more sloppy, be more lazy. Now, we can only speculate if that's like a punishment from OpenAI to save money or whatever it is. But at the very least, we're aiming to keep the context windows as short as possible, which has some consequences on splitting tasks across multiple agents, which is to try and make the system prompt as condensed as possible, and to try and only feed it information that you need at any given point in time. As all of you are aware, the cost of OpenAI and all these other model factories is also a function of the tokens you use. So by limiting the amount of tokens, we get our cost down. We can also charge less and give a lot more bang for the buck for the awesome customers that we have. We also use. I've gotten a few questions about this over the past couple of days, and just to shed some light on that, we do not use any agent frameworks internally. We do not use AutoGen. We do not use Crew. We do not use LangChain. We use some like Llama Index and stuff for research-specific tasks, but largely we use OpenAI's SDK directly. We use their tool calling excessively, but no agent framework on top of that. We basically started building Databutton around September, October last year. At that point in time, there was very little, let's call it production-ready things, and so we took the bet on marrying ourselves pretty tightly to OpenAI. And now there exists all kinds of model routers, and there exists a bunch of companies that has taken the OpenAI SDK and lets you call any model. So yeah, we are not users of a big agent framework. I know that some of our customers have used Crew, they've used LangChain, some have used Super Agent, and there's basically heaps of these that can lower the barrier for getting started. But at the end of the day, we ended up here. So I hope this was like a little bit about Databutton for those who's not too familiar with it, and a little bit about how we think about this world. From our point of view, the ways in which we will use the models will have a larger impact to the models themselves. So even though that GPT-5 and 6 and 7 is probably going to come out over the next months or years or whatever, the potential in orchestrating this and prompting these to be better is I think we've exhausted extremely little of that potential. And secondly, the way that humans are interacting with these are also very much unset. We have been working on Databutton now for about 5 or 6 months. We've been so lucky that we've had paying customers for about 5 months. And even through that, we've learned so much about how people prefer to engage and how they do not prefer to engage, what prompts they like to use. And this is a very, 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 very much a theme and a topic that I think will change a lot over the next couple of months. So with that out of the way, I thought I'd be daring enough to build an app live together with all of you here in the meet. And since I know that we have a lot of, while I change screen, if there's any questions or things that people are curious about, please shout out. Now is a great time. Excellent. Awesome.
Martin, I've got a quick question. If I can,
please.
So you talked about context windows and kind of getting fuzzy as they get bigger, and then there's things like Gemini with its million tokens and saying like, do you see that fuzziness going away? Is that because in the conversation history with Databutton, if I can give it, it feels like if I can give it more, that's helpful. So on million context windows, are they a real thing that are going to get better, or is your pursuit of like smaller context windows? Do you think that's a theme you're going to carry on with?
Yeah, no, I think it primarily relates to precision work. So I think if you try to get it to be precise, so to write code that works and not be sloppy, I do think that a large context window is not very helpful. But when it comes to just conversations, like asking questions and like a free-flowing conversations, then like I don't think it's an issue in general. I think that for the outer agents and for the more talkative agents that we have in Databutton, we'll probably expand that to as many million token windows it allows us, so we can store all the information about basically everything. But when it comes down to wanting to do stuff, so you're going to do some research, or you're going to write some code, or you're going to do like a calculation of sorts, then as of now, at the very least, you'll get a lot better results by zooming in and making like a small agent that does that and only that, and does not have a lot of noise, basically, in its own history and its own memory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So Hans, we have the same experience with reasoning and answering questions. Too much context makes it hard to the LLM to prioritize what it should weight. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And truth be told, I can even resonate as a human. It's harder to quickly summarize after a 2-hour conversation than if I just get it succinctly. But I do think that you'll find literature and stuff on this too in its current state. Now, whether this will be improved over time, I don't know. I think that the people on this call are part of figuring that out together. So yeah, as you can all see my screen, I'm in Databutton. For those not familiar with it, it is a platform that can help you build awesome apps, and it largely leverages agents to do so. So I was thinking that as we have so many aspiring entrepreneurs and people raising money, that I'll build a awesome VC chatbot that can give investment advice on every single one of the startups here that wants to provide their website, and we can prompt a proper we can make a proper app that will take an URL and give investment advice. So in order to do that, I will create a new app, and I want to create an app that provides investment advice about startups. Yeah, it's good enough. So now I have an application in Databutton. So in here, I have a UI, which is what we're looking at and is loading at the right-hand side. And the UI in Databutton is split into 2 concepts, one of which is pages, which is a page has its URL. It can be linked to in a nav bar, and it's a web page. And it has a concept of components, which is small reusable UI elements that can be used across pages and multiple times in the same page. So by as I can see here, the agent is starting to help me, and it's telling me to let's embark on building your app that provides investment advice about startups. It tells me to start by designing the UI for the homepage, where users can input their interests, their criteria for startup investment. Let's see, would you like to begin, or do you have another starting point? I want the user to input a URL to their website. Then I want to build an agent that will scrape the website, analyze the content, and give investment advice back to the user. It should also say whether how much it should invest from 0 to 10 million. So this is the app that I want to build. I want to build a quick, nice tool that people can go into and have fun and basically paste in their website. And I'll do my very best to prompt up an agent that can analyze the website and try to use everything it knows and pop out how much it's willing to invest from 0 to 10. So let's see. The first thing it wants is for me to design a UI component for the homepage that includes a form. No, that sounds good. Shall we proceed with creating the UI component for the... Yeah, let's do it. So all the agents inside of Databutton is heavily probed towards guiding you to build apps. And it's heavily probed to help you scope down your ideas to get something out really quickly. So it will try to take the input that I give it, and it will try to determine the next few steps that will make something that looks good in the UI, something that will get the functionality in place. And then once you're up at a certain point, which might be like a POC or an MVC or an MVP of some sort, you can expand it in every single way. So as it is now, the URL input form component is ready. It's designed to let users input a website URL for analysis. Let's see. So now it's updating my app. So soon I would hopefully see a little page. There we go. So I have a little page that asks me to enter the website URL and analyze the website. I don't suspect, let's see, is there anything else you like? I don't suspect that it'll work, but I'll give it a go anyway. Yeah, so as I click the analyze website, I just get a little thing in the console down here, which tells me that the URL has been submitted. Great stuff. Now let's build the agent. So now that we've created the shell of our UI, in order to create deeper functionality, we need to create what in Databutton is called a capability, which is basically a API endpoint that you can build. So this is where we will be creating our agent. Yes, I do. So can you export components and backend code and use it outside of Databutton? There's no actual export button, but there is code visible in every page and every component and every API endpoint. There's very little code that is custom to the Databutton platform. There are, however, some. The specific stuff that we do is to communicate between basically between the UI and the backend. So there, the agents are generating a set of SDKs that it teaches the front-end agents to use. And that's basically it. Other than that, you can go both ways. You can implement it here and export it, or you can copy in some React components or code from elsewhere and use it. The agent are aware of everything that is here, not only what it is written. So we have the gentleman who is kind enough to have video on is a big fan of also using ChatGPT for cases where he needs to produce code that he does not believe Databutton can do. In which case, he just pastes that code back into Databutton and continues with his day. So it's not a agent only produces, and it's not a human only produces. It can mix and match, and the agent keeps itself updated. So let's see. I've just checked the latest code for our website analysis capability. It looks like we have a basic structure in place, ready to be expanded with the actual logic. That is right. Would you like to start by defining the input and output models more precisely? So oops. So the user will provide a URL to a landing page. We need to scrape this URL, send the content to ChatGPT so that it can provide investment advice back. It's important that ChatGPT is prompted to be an overly arrogant, all-knowing VC, so people take them seriously. There we go. So to bring this vision to life, so as I give a somewhat conversational idea, it helps me break it down into the steps, and we basically build it together. So scraping the provided URL to get the landing page content, and then we'll send the scraped content to ChatGPT with a prompt that embodies an overly arrogant, all-knowing VC persona for investment advice. Let's start with the first step, scrape the URL. Common choice include beautiful soup and scrapey. Would you like to use? Yeah, let's go. I'm very comfortable with Databutton making that decision for me. So as we're now building the backend, so this is the API endpoint. So this is not available to users. So here I can use like the secrets and API keys and stuff like that without being afraid. And this is now writing Python. So the agent has another set of tools that it has in the UI builder, but it basically has a small Jupyter notebook that it can prototype code in and install things in and just make sure that it can do everything that it needs to do. And as it learns what's the right way to do it, it'll update the endpoint accordingly. So in this case, the web scraping test was successful. We managed to scrape content from an example website, which means we're ready to move on to the next step. Before we proceed, we'll need to ensure we have access to the OpenAI API. Yes, please. So since we're using OpenAI, which with so many other libraries needs some API key or some secret or some credentials, Databutton is, of course, instructed with a way to deal with that. I'll get your question in a minute after I've pasted in this little code. I'll paste in my OpenAI API key, and then let me read the question quick. How about complex logic like workflow, third-party API integrations, e.g. payment gateway? Yeah. So complex logic is typically not like a big problem. You would provide here what you could basically type a whole spec if you want. It will not build it all at once, but it will try to break it down into actionable steps and guide you towards doing all the steps. It will use you as a test subject throughout the workflow. So typically, I can show here in this case, as I do realize this is a cheaper starting point or not the most complex app, but I also at the mercy of, 10, 15 minutes. Would you like to proceed with drafting? Why don't you create a prompt? Just make sure that the VC always returns a sum between 0 and 10 million, and also gives a reasoning with max 5 sentences. Yeah, so more complex workflows. We have a lot of customers who's doing like more complex stuff where they would typically chain together like various search APIs or internal APIs and then return it back. I don't think that's a big problem. Now we have integrated some integration towards like Firebase and those typical like app backends. So a lot of our users delegate the authentication part and the sign-in stuff and whatnot to Firebase, and then use this just like an integration with Databutton, which then basically just gives you an auth layer in front with a login page and a sign-up page and stuff like that you can style. For more complex workflows, it's hard to say. It's like, I'm sure there's like limits to how deep it can go, but it will just take a long time. It'll guide you through it step by step, and you might chunk it up into multiple capabilities or figure it out. But we have customers who's doing quite deep complex workflows. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Let's see. I've crafted a ChatGPT prompt that embodies an overly arrogant, all-knowing VC persona and tested it with some example content. The response suggests an investment of 5 million. Actually, why don't we test this? Can you test it with databutton.com? Let's see if it's right. So it has now, the reason why it knows that it can do it is because it has just prototyped some code in a notebook. where it has put in a prompt here, and it put in a system message here. And then it's, yeah, that's basically it. So let's see when it does it with, Databutton. It is created the function called scrape website, and it's created the function called generate investment advice that is running. In the verdant digital age where AI blooms, Databutton emerges as a formidable contender, intertwining the ease of no-code development with the robust power of AI. It's very flattering. Maybe I need to make it a little bit more realistic. Let's see what the sum was between, what was it? Perhaps 7 to 10 million? Not bad. All right, the test with Databutton was a success. I am happy. Would you like to proceed with integrating this functionality? Yep, let's do it. So now that it is prototyped and it's pretty sure that it can do it, it has done it with a couple of cases, then it's time to basically update the app. So now it'll take the learnings from that, and it will write the endpoint, which is what we have in this big code editor now. It will write an API endpoint, and then that will then be communicated to the other agents doing the front end, which can now leverage this. So I'll, in the last couple of minutes, I will hopefully get all over there, and we have a working app. If you want to, Kumar, if you do want to share a workflow that you find complex, I'd be happy to go through it in a little bit more detail. It is certainly what we're trying to cater to, as opposed to like design sketches and stuff like that. Here we go. So now it has written my endpoint here. I don't need to particularly look over all the code, but like this is basically what it's doing. So then I can go back. Would you like to test this capability to see? I've already tested it, so I'm pretty good. Why don't we, let's test it with langchain.com before we move on. And let's see. So now I can see in the console that it's actually doing an API call to /analyze website. And then we'll figure out if LangChain is investable after A16Z gave them all the money. Took 15 seconds with ChatGPT 4 Turbo, which I see that it's using. The capability to return an investment advice to invest, suggesting an investment amount of 5 to 7 million. That's not bad. Cool. Is there anything you'd like to add or adjust in the app? Let's integrate it into the UI. So yeah, so now that it knows what to do and it has built me a backend, basically, I've now been sitting and talking to the backend agent in Databutton. It sends me back into the UI builder, and I can comfortably hide the code. And then it looks like we're ready to integrate the website analysis capability. How would you like to display the investment advice? Just an inline display below the form is good. Make sure you render it in Markdown, as that's what ChatGPT returns. So with this, it'll start to basically build the integration between the front end and the back end. And hopefully we're good to go and we can test it. It probably doesn't do stuff that I would like in an app. It tends to not start with loading spinners and good messages and good titles and stuff like that. But it'll hopefully be better. The investment advice display component is ready, designed to render the investment device. Would you like to proceed by, yeah, do that. Excellent. So yeah, as we're turning to the end, and there's probably a 2-minute or a 1 to 2 minute generations as we fire up the last things. If there's anything, any questions, any annoyances, or I might have said anything wrong, can you add an investment background gradient image with 50% opacity? Yeah, why not? Let's see. So I think the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is for the LLMs to be quicker. That I think will have the biggest impact, because there is, as while you're working with these type of systems, there is a lot of waiting. Less so than using a developer agency, granted, but still.
I'm having a quick question here.
Please.
Okay. See, can we integrate Meta Llama 3 into this?
Yeah. I just use ChatGPT because that's, I don't know, really. It's in my fingers. But yeah, you can use any LLM that you can, basically. So in Databutton, we have given a lot of documentation to various libraries, but far from all. So what that means in practice is that if you have any particular nuances, so to speak, that you want, you can simply copy paste the documentation that you find, or some getting started examples or something. If it's a brand new library, for instance, you would typically find their documentation page, and you would just copy paste it into the chat and say, given this, can we build this thing? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that is very common on how people try to use the very, very newer libraries that we haven't added, and also things are always changing. Let's see. Look at that. The analyze website button doesn't seem to work. Have you hooked it up to the website analysis capability? So I can, to be more precise with my prompts, I can use basically a hashtag, and I get all the components and all the pages and stuff to pipe even more information to the agents. I'd like to proceed. Yes, please. Double check. It is not working as expected, but is it hooked up to the UI to the handle parts messages? This function is triggered when the URL is. Is it really? I don't think it is. Would you like me to run a test? Yes, please. Yes, please. Let's see the test. Okay, so the test is successful. It's still not working here. Are you sure the URL input form works as expected? So this is now the working model, basically. So then now I can talk through the various agents. I can give it the information that it needs, or I can get it basically go on its own. Captures the URL but lacks integration to actually call the website analysis capability upon form submission. The handle submit function, and then it finds the error, and it says, would you like me to proceed? Yes, please. There we go. And I realized that I'm already 2 minutes over my time, which was supposed to end 2 minutes ago. So at the very end, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining. And also, I know that there's a few of our beloved customers here, so thank you so much for helping us build this stuff. It would be impossible without. We've been enormously lucky to have quite a lot of people with us over the past few months who's been frustrated, who's been happy, who's been sad about things going or things not working. So it's largely due to them that we're able to actually build anything at all. So thank you again, and I hope that more people will start to think about literally prompting apps, and whether it's Databutton or somewhere else. I think it's an extremely promising paradigm, and I think we have some interesting times ahead. So thank you all very much for showing up. Just to put the icing on the cake, I hope that this will work now, as it's fixed it. Now at least I can see that it has fixed integration. I can see that it has done the post request, and it says invest. You shouldn't. Can you also show the reasoning? There we go. All right. Well, at the very least, you should invest in Databutton, and you should probably also invest in LangChain if you get a chance. All right. Thank you very much again for coming. What happens if you click on Show History? Oh, Louis, that is a great question. Now, Show History will keep all the versions that the assistant or the agents will generate for you. So in the event, which does happen, that it produces code that is not what you want, you can jump back to the previous version or check what it actually changed. This will also be the case if you paste in some code from a documentation page or from a friend. Then you will also see that either I made it together with the assistant or I made it alone. So it's basically a big version history that you'll find in every single coding space of Databutton. All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.